Awesome. So, joined by Sydney from Mental Health Podcast to have a little chat about all sorts of things, really. But I've heard so much about you, first of all.
I hope it's all right.
It's all good. Don't worry, it's all good. And it's so impressive, like what you've done in, was it 3 years now, or just under 3 years?
I think it's about 3 years from when we started. I must admit, we haven't done too much for the last year, just purely because all of us have been busy doing other things. But I think it's probably about time that we start getting back into it, and because it's something we all enjoy. So I think, yeah, now is the time. I mean, what better time than quarantine, as they say?
Exactly. But what was the thinking behind it? Because obviously I know that Parvinder works where she works. What was the thought process behind starting it? Because obviously it's something that's needed.
Well, I spent quite a lot of time looking for something that represented people with different mental health conditions. So, for example, I live with borderline personality disorder and depression and anxiety as a result of the borderline personality. And trying to find something that wasn't over sensationalized about people like me was really difficult. So there's things like Silver Lining Playbook and that, also Fatal Attraction and things like that, and they veer towards the extreme of behavior associated with people with mental health, and I was like, that doesn't represent me, and it probably doesn't represent a whole host of the population.
Right.
So let's have a look at books and see if any of those represent people. And I found things such as 13 Reasons Why, and I found that quite difficult to read, purely because the premise is that it's a girl who leaves tapes to people and tells them why she then took her own life by suicide, in almost like a blame fashion. And also other books such as Girl Interrupted, which I found quite useful because that is a better portrayal of borderline personality.
And a great film as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Great film.
With Winona Ryder and Angelina Jolie. Yeah.
And I love Elizabeth Moss. I don't think Elizabeth Moss is in.
Yes.
I'm there. So, yeah, that's a great movie. But I think you're right. I think certainly from a Hollywood perspective, it's few and far between, because the money man, the producers, the people that are thinking about how successful a film is going to be, because ultimately it's show business.
Yeah, definitely.
They're thinking about what is sexy, what is sellable, and inevitably it's always the destruction of a human being.
Oh, definitely.
Rather than the uplifting side of it. So. Yeah, certainly when the approach I try to take to my film Anonymous is focusing on the recovery. It's addiction specifically as a specific part of mental health, but I'm hoping it will set a trend.
That would be awesome.
It's a different way to look at things. It's a different way to actually, we should be making heroes of these people to stand up and say, yes, I recognize there is something eating away at me, but no, I'm not going to let it beat me, and I'm going to go to a recovery meeting, or I'm going to start a podcast, or and go to Parliament and win some awards, and all these other amazing things that you've done, and I've just got so much admiration for anybody that does that. I don't know how much Parvinder told you about the inspiration for the film. Partial inspiration was a friend of mine from my Bible study group, who's a recovering cocaine addict, and I always found it amazing to me that how dedicated he was to his recovery, and that sort of told me that this isn't something that, like a cold or the flu, that you have and then you spend 2 weeks in bed and you're fine. It's something that is a constant battle. And I guess it's the same for all aspects of mental health.
Definitely. I mean, another part of borderline personality disorder is that you are impulsive and you may exhibit things that aren't necessarily what other people would assume. But I mean, I found that I had issues with alcohol, and I'm having major issues at the moment with food. And I think with cocaine and alcohol, you can abstain with those things, which is awesome. Unfortunately, with food, I'm finding that the most tricky, because you still have to eat, and it's trying to stop that eating to excess. So it's really interesting, because I want to see people who have struggled but are now fighting against the thing that they've struggled against and are able to succeed. I mean, that's the thing that makes me feel so positive about life, is that there is a happy ending, hopefully, out there, if only we could get to it.
Yeah, and I think with all aspects of mental health, what you've tried to do and what addiction recovery meetings try to do is create a community of people that have the same issue, because it's teaming up against this. And obviously it's always easier to win a fight when you're in community. And I think that's the amazing thing about what you've done, is effectively you've gone, it's not that easy for me to find my community because I can't see it in the movies and in the books that I'm reading. So I'll make my community, and stepping out with Parvinder and everybody else behind the podcast, and the fact that it's had the success that it's had shows you that there is a community there that's felt the same.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing that I find quite difficult to understand, and I know that, as you said, if kind of what they did in newspapers, if it bleeds it leads kind of thing, it's entertainment at the end of the day. So how in some ways do you make mental health entertaining without in some ways hitting too close to home for some people? That means that they then feel additional pressure to, if their story isn't going the same way, to try and achieve the same as their favorite film character or something like that.
Yeah, and you're right, and it's often a case of like any business, people look at the tried and tested methods and they go, well, this film, this book sold this many copies, sold this many tickets, and therefore was successful, so let's just copy and paste the format, copy and paste the things that people are saying they thought was cool. And I think as an artist, as a creative, you have a responsibility to not just turn around and copy and paste, to actually turn around and say, well, what's the story that I want to tell, and what's the story that I think can best benefit people? And I think it's something you always have to be aware of. It's a tricky one, because you want to be aware of obviously not hurting people and going too far and triggering something. In fact, the friend I was saying about earlier, with the cocaine addiction, I went to him when I was doing my research to ask his advice and what have you, and a couple of weeks later he had a relapse, and I felt, for a few days, I felt at least partially responsible, because I in my head I thought, well, is it my conversations with him that have triggered that need, that desire, or enhanced it perhaps? But of course it wasn't. It was lockdown. And it was the fact that with addiction in particular, and people are locked inside the house with their demons and nowhere to turn and nowhere to go and do the things you normally do, and your routine has been broken up, and of course routine is so important. So I think that when you're creating something, you have to find that balance between being true to yourself as an artist and being brave in terms of the hard-hitting side of the truth, but also not causing harm to anybody.
Yeah, I think it's such a fine line that in some ways people that write books and people who make films have to kind of navigate, is that what is going to be too much, and for some people it's going to be too much, for other people it's not going to be enough, and you haven't necessarily gone deep enough. But it's fantastic to hear that in some ways, that even how to phrase this, that I think if it was me and you'd come to me and ask me my opinion, and ask me about addiction and so on, I would not blame you. I would be so happy in some ways that someone was finding that interesting. Someone was taking an interest in me personally and what I've gone through. And I think that's the difference with the things that you're doing, is that you're actually being interested in the stories behind people who are suffering with mental health conditions.
So again, that's the title of the film is Anonymous, and that's very deliberate in terms of the fact that, you know, what it means, the fact that it's Alcoholics Anonymous, Cocaine Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, Sugar Anonymous, whatever, Gamblers Anonymous, all these different things that they have. They're all there because the word anonymous does a couple of things. It creates a sense of community and saying that it doesn't really matter what your name is. It's you know, the thing that unites us isn't our name, isn't our skin colors, isn't our ages, our social statuses, our genders. It's none of that. It's the affliction. And then the other thing it does, as a title, is it enables me as an artist to play with the idea that there's more going on to all of these people. They are more than just their afflictions, and they're more than just one affliction at the same time.
I do believe that, yeah, it does feel at times like you're on your own, and if you walk down the street, it's not like I'm wearing a big badge that says I am borderline depressed and anxious. It's really difficult, I think, and that's the thing that I really enjoy, is getting to know people, a bit like you said before, is understanding how others deal with these things and are able to overcome them, because that's what's gonna inspire me to keep working on it. I mean, I've been in therapy now since I was diagnosed, so about 7-8 years, so it's been a long battle, and the progress that you make, I think it's difficult to probably show in such a short space of time, because in films you like this all wrapped up and it's all happy and stuff, whereas it's still an ongoing battle for me. And there are times when the depression kicks in and it's really difficult, or my behaviour becomes more impulsive and erratic than usual, and I've had to learn skills and how to communicate with people, because that was a big thing, was that I wasn't able to express what I needed. And so I kind of went into almost like temper tantrums, like a 2-year-old throwing their toys out the pram. I would get really angry. But if I start to see people that are succeeding, then that gives me hope. And that's what I think people need more than anything, and particularly now with all the craziness that's going on, because obviously we're recording this during the COVID-19 pandemic. You look at people out there and you go, where is the support for them? Because this has been such a difficult time for so many people. Like, for example, your friend who has relapsed. I can totally understand why that would be the case, because you are stuck in your house with nothing else really to do. I mean, I've put on a load of weight as a result of being at home.
Just to circle back to what you were saying earlier, what's missing and what I've tried to do with Anonymous is create heroes out of people in recovery, and to create leaders in a community of people with a particular mental health affliction. And that's, again, that comes back to major kudos to you, because you've become that person. You've become that role model, in terms of, there will be people who listen to your podcast, there will be people who see the awards you're picking up, see you going into Parliament and going, this is someone who wears her battle like a badge of honor, and says, I'm going to beat this. And I promise you there are people watching you and there are people listening to you that are inspired and motivated to keep their battles going. So just as...
Wow, thank you. When you're doing a podcast, you don't know who you're talking to. And I do kind of feel a bit more like I am anonymous, although I'm talking about myself. and I'm trying to be as open as possible. I mean, it's taken me a long time to get to this point. Before, I would hide it and I would run away from it, and I wouldn't let people see me because I didn't think that people would like me.
Sydney, I am going to have to, as I've got a day of...
No worries, no worries. This has
So
been amazing. Yeah, thank you so much.
thank you so much. I'm sure I will see you hopefully at a premiere somewhere
Oh, that'd be
sometime,
awesome.
but we'll see. A lot of work between now and then. So
I bet.
nice to see you, Sydney, and
Nice to see you too.
I'm sure I'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.